This is the regular meeting of the Ojai Planning Commission for Wednesday, October 4th, 2017. Members of the public wishing to address the Planning Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card and file it with the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record. Here comes one now.
Public comments.
Thank you. Speakers should state their name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the commission, not the audience. While Planning Commission is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Could we have the roll call, please?
Chair Merck.
Here.
Vice Chair Colsey.
Here.
Commissioners Nolan.
Here.
Jagiello.
Here.
Corbin.
Here.
Zabilla.
Here.
Powers.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Zabilla, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So public communication is the time set aside during the Planning Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the Commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. And I believe Grace Malloy would like to make a comment.
My name is Grace Malloy, and I'm one of the 5 members of the Ojai Valley Municipal Advisory Council. So for people who aren't familiar with the MAC, we're an advisory board that serves the unincorporated area of the Ojai Valley, from the Upper Valley to just below Matilha Canyon to out a little bit past Lake Casitas and down to Foster Park. Our council hears similar issues to those that the Planning Commission or the City Council hears here in Ojai, only we're only in advisory capacity. So we give recommendations to Supervisor Bennett, and then he takes action. So I'm here to summarize our most recent meeting, which was a bit of a spicy one, down at the Oakview Community Center. We heard public testimony and voted on a recommendation concerning the parking of oversized vehicles on public streets in Oakview, which on many streets they're quite plentiful. So Supervisor Bennett's office researched possible solutions after having heard many complaints. I've heard, I think, at least 20 since our last meeting, so probably a total of about 40, about the safety and aesthetic issues involved with all these oversized vehicles being illegally parked on public streets. The issue is that the state law is unenforceable as it stands right now as to this issue of oversized vehicles. So Supervisor Bennett's office proposed that we consider adopting an ordinance similar to that that Oak Park has adopted, as well as many other cities. So far, no countywide or unincorporated areas, but cities such as Oxnard, Santa Barbara have adopted similar restrictions on oversized vehicle parking that make the code enforceable by county officials. So we heard about 2.5 hours of public testimony on the issue, and very heated on both sides of the issue. Steve was there and actually kind of helped us through it a little bit. And so we ended up making a recommendation to request that the County Transportation Department advise the MAC regarding potential adoption of a regulation that requires that oversized vehicles be parked an adequate distance from intersections, and a measure to address the restriction of the travel lanes that are happening in a few streets in Oakview caused by oversized vehicle parking. So this is pretty different from the proposed ordinance that Oak Park had, a similar thing that was parking only to load and unload. It made it entirely illegal to park on a public street with an oversized vehicle unless you were loading and unloading, say, your RV or your trailer as well as it provided a definition of oversize with height, width, and length, and then exceptions by application for work vehicles, disabled folks, stuff like that. So we ended up, that motion that we recommended was approved unanimously, and the meeting was adjourned around 10 p.m. So we're hoping to hear back from the County Transportation Department with some ideas as to exactly what distances and things like that would be helpful to keep Oakview residents safe. And it did feel kind of inappropriate. We all commented on this. All 5 of us members commented that it should be really addressing the entire unincorporated area rather than just one neighborhood. That felt quite unfair. So if there is to be some sort of an ordinance proposal put forward, it would be for the entire unincorporated area. Everyone would be noticed and so on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Grace, and thanks for serving on the MAC. We're going to move on to our consent item. All matters listed on the consent calendar to be considered routine by the governing bodies and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed. There'll be no discussion of these items unless before the governing body votes on the motion to adopt. Specific items are removed from the consent calendar for separate motions. We only have one item, which is a time extension, modification request for design review permit DRP 0501 RV01, an approved project for the restoration of and minor additions to 7 existing structures, 8 dwelling units, the addition of 2 new units in a proposed duplex building, and the approval of circulation improvements for the property located at the Cottages Among the Flowers at 312, 312A through F, and 314B West Aliso Street, approved on August 17th. And Mr. Quillisi, did you say you wanted to recuse yourself from this?
I either have to recuse myself because of the location of my residence, or I have to abstain and not participate in the discussion, which sounds pretty much the same to me. I would ask the city attorney what I should do here.
The rule for consent calendar items is that state as you've done that you're not going to be included in the vote on the matter, but you can stay at the dais. It's distinct from anything else. If the item is pulled by any other commissioner, then you leave the dais.
Okay?
All righty. Anybody have any discussion on this? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion
All right.
that we adopt the PC resolution approving the time extension for the approved site plan and existing dwelling units for the Cottages Among the Flowers, project DRP 15-01 RV01, that was approved on August 17, 2016.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have an approved and second. Any discussion? Could we have a roll call, please?
Nolan?
Yes.
Jagiello?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Merck?
Yes.
Zabilla?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And Commissioner Quillisi is still among us. Well, jump right in, right?
No, it's just a question and a comment. Is it normal on a consent item like this one that we get all the paperwork for it as well, even though we're not
I wouldn't
really-
call it normal, but
Well, like,
Do we
is
have
that
a-
protocol?
Any member of the commission could request to have something pulled
And then
from
we
the
would need
consent
this.
calendar, and we would need this.
Got it.
Okay.
That's exactly correct.
all right. Thank you. We're going to move on to disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. Can we start with you, Ray? We'll move around.
I visited both locations and had no ex parte contacts.
I visited both locations and have had no ex parte contacts.
I visited both locations and had no ex parte contacts.
I visited both locations and had no ex parte contacts.
Visited both locations and no ex parte contacts.
And I too visited both locations and had no ex parte contacts.
And I, at this point, am very familiar with both sites and have had no ex parte contacts. All right, we're going to move on to our public hearing items. The first one is design review permit DRP 1709 for the remodel of an existing 2-story residence and the replacement of an existing detached 2-vehicle carport with an enclosed detached 2-car garage and with a conditioned space above the garage for office use at 207 East Eucalyptus Street, assessor's parcel number 02100733030. The general land use designation and zoning classification of the site is village and mixed use, A categorical exemption has been prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. The property owner is Garrett and Annie Clifford. The applicant, the representative, is Stephen Foster. This is continued from the September 20th Planning Commission meeting. Could we hear from staff on this, please?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. As you indicated, this is an item that was considered at your last meeting. The commission directed staff to look into a couple of issues that were raised during the course of the deliberation and discussion, and to come back and address those issues. The main issues that rose were the use of the second-story space that is being proposed in the remodel, and then several issues related to the conditions. You have been provided with a revised set of plans that deletes the storage area, the previously identified storage area, from the bathroom or restroom area on that second story space. The city attorney has also added some information in the staff report on page 4 of 5 regarding the use of the space and any potential use for an ADU or conflict with the city's accessory dwelling unit ordinance, considering that there is a second unit on the site presently. With regard to the conditions, we do recommend, and there was a previous condition concerning the commercial use of that space and issues related to it. We have recommended deletion of that condition. It will be addressed by the city code as it exists. Should there be any potential?
Condition 3?
Pardon?
Is this the old condition 3?
It is the old condition 3, yes, correct. That issue would be addressed at such time as there is any proposed commercial use on the property, whether it's for a downstairs space or an upstairs space, and the city code, both the building code and zoning ordinance, would apply at that time. So with those changes, staff does recommend approval of the development review permit. The applicant is here, as is Mr. Summers, if you have any additional questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Quilisi.
I have to confess, I went through the painful exercise of watching on YouTube the last meeting of this commission, and it was a painful exercise. It's bad enough to do it here and then to go through it again. But I wrote down several questions that I thought arose from that meeting. And maybe this all relates to condition 3 now, but the big thing I think that we came up with was, do we need a deed restriction on the area above the new garage, the enlarged garage? Or does the new ADU ordinance allow that space to be constructed without a deed restriction? Now, there is a guest house on the property, and the ordinance says if you have a guest house, you can't have an ADU. But the state law says you can have an ADU no matter what's on the property, I think. And so I'd request some clarification on that.
Do you want me to clarify that, or do you want to do your questions and then your preference?
Yeah, it can't, I don't think this property can be an ADU because there's a guest house already?
That's not true.
Okay, that's great.
Do you want me to, let me clarify that point.
Okay.
Thank you.
The ADU ordinance, as recently adopted by the council and after significant discussion
Driven
by
by
this
state
commission.
law, yeah.
And driven by state law, but beyond state law. Remember, the council went beyond mere state law. Provides that you may have an ADU and an accessory structure, as specifically defined just for that ordinance, as either a non-habitable space, a gazebo, or conditioned space with no more than a half bath. For example, a pool house. No shower, just a sink and a toilet. No shower and no kitchen. This property has an existing primary residence and an existing accessory dwelling unit. It is allowed to have on top of that an accessory structure, such as the proposed studio above the garage that would have solely conditioned space and a half bath. It may not have a guest house in addition, which would be conditioned space with a full bath, sink, toilet, shower.
Right. The second structure on the property now is a guest house.
No, it is an accessory dwelling unit.
Oh, it has a
It already
kitchen?
has an accessory dwelling unit. It has a kitchen. There are 2 kitchens on the property at present.
Okay, okay.
That's
good.
the key distinction that I think was missing in the prior conversation.
So we can now consider the proposed second-story space above the enlarged garage to be an accessory unit.
Accessory structure
Excuse me, an accessory structure.
is distinct from an accessory dwelling unit. Admittedly, the terminology gets a little overlapping, but the space above the garage is not a guest house because it only is proposed with a half bath, and the bathroom that's proposed isn't big enough to add a shower later.
Right.
Not presuming that the applicant would do things without a permit. And it's not a guest house because it doesn't have that full bath
Yeah.
or a kitchen. And then it is permitted as such because it is an existing primary, an existing second or accessory dwelling unit, and then now proposing this accessory structure on top.
An accessory structure, okay. So it would be legal as an accessory structure.
Correct.
Great.
And it's in compliance with setbacks. And then the question, of course, for the commission is the other design review permit findings. Does it meet those? Which is the matter before you tonight.
Okay, great. That's
Is that
all I
all
needed.
your
Thank you,
questions?
sir.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, no, we have to hear from the applicant
Okay.
first.
I thought we could just move ahead with this one. Okay. I'm sure
Could we hear
Stephen has
from
a
the
lot to
applicant?
say about it.
Good evening, Commissioners, staff. Really nothing to say. It's as a continuation. I think we know why we're here, to get clarification on the legalities of what we're trying to do, and I appreciate staff following through on that. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? All right, thank you. This is a public hearing. I don't think I have any items here, but anybody would like to speak on this? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Chester, now's your chance.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adopt PC resolution approving DRP 17-09 for the remodel of the existing 2-story residence and the replacement of the existing 2-vehicle carport with an enclosed detached 2-car garage with a conditioned space above the garage and studio, subject to the findings and conditions of approval and accept the CEQA categorical exception.
I'll second.
Thank you, Avi. Is there further discussion? All right, could we have a roll call, please?
Nolan?
Yes?
Aguilar?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Quillisi?
Yes,
Merck?
Yes,
Sabilla?
Yes.
Powers?
Yes.
Motion
you.
passes.
you're now ready to go, and I appreciate everybody's patience with that process. It was, I think that's the first thing we've had since we updated our ADU ordinance that created that sort of confusion, so appreciate your clients working through it, yeah.
yep. The clarification by the city attorney cleared the path.
Yep.
Thank
We're
you.
all set. We're going to move on to item 3, which is the design review permit DRP 15-12, development agreement DA 1701, and lot line adjustment LLA 1701 for exterior improvements at 334 East Ojai Avenue. Assessor's parcel number 0210140 and 140-30. The project involves a lot line adjustment to city-owned property and to private property by the applicant to accommodate outdoor patio space and the commercial renovation of the existing building to accommodate restaurant uses. The general plan designation of the site is general commercial and the zoning classification of the site is commercial. A categorical exemption has been prepared pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act. The property owners are the Shanks Investment Group. This is continued from the September 20th Planning Commission meeting. Could we hear from staff on this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an application with which the commission has much familiarity. As you indicated, is the building located at 334 East Ojai Avenue. It involves a proposal to renovate the existing structure and reorganize the lot lines in order to provide the opportunity for outdoor seating with that renovated structure. The property is currently bisected by a public paseo or pathway, and the lot line adjustment would shift that pathway to the west to accommodate the outdoor seating, which would be potentially outdoor seating area, which would be associated with the structure. The Plan Commission has heard this as a concept review item, as well as several previous hearings, and recommended approval of the project to the City Council. The City Council did consider the item and referred it back to you for further consideration, specifically with respect to compliance with the Arcade Plaza design guidelines. Your staff report contains a lot of detail concerning that, and I'll address that in just a moment. This evening, we provided you with a memorandum which just provided the specific language from the City Council minutes concerning the referral back to the Planning Commission. It makes reference, rather, to design option C. The applicant has actually withdrawn that design option C, as well as the other options that were previously considered by the Planning Commission and City Council, and has offered a derivation or a variation on that option. And that was the basis for the staff evaluation against the design guidelines. Also, we asked the applicant to provide more information regarding specific color information and specifications. The applicant will be addressing that issue with you this evening. And so with that, I'll just point out that the staff report that has been provided is essentially what you have seen before and what was provided to the City Council. On page 7 of 12 begins the analysis against the arcade design guidelines. I should say Arcade Plaza design guidelines, because there are guidelines that also apply to the arcade itself, and there was confusion early on in the process concerning those guidelines. There's a checklist that is actually within the guideline document. We provided that checklist verbatim in the staff report, along with our analysis of compliance against that checklist, as well as a broader analysis of the compliance of the project to the entire document itself. Staff has identified 3 issues that we think merit further consideration by the Planning Commission this evening as it applies to the design guidelines. First is the color of the proposed color of the stucco, the major design element of the building. The applicant's proposing we call a mottled white. I don't want to speak for the applicant. They will address that issue in further detail. But the design guidelines would maybe suggest a warmer color, such as is provided on the arcade structures themselves. We had some concern with the railing detail as being perhaps modernistic in detail, as opposed to a more traditional Mission Revival type of design. And then the last issue concerned the entrance from Ojai Avenue, which is actually on the property line. And we did have some discussion with the applicants after the City Council meeting to discuss these various issues. Because of that doorway is actually on the property line, that abuts Caltrans right away and has some implications for adding design elements to that facade. But we did suggest that more could be done to enhance the significance of that particular entrance. So with that, I'll conclude the staff presentation and suggest that the commission hear from the applicant regarding their approach to the council's direction and their evaluation. Okay, thank you. We'll pass around the colored elevations as well. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff? Yes, Commissioner Zell.
Technical difficulties.
No, just a lot of it.
Mr. Winiger, I just wanted to note that I had called Mr. Higgins to, when I received this narrative talking about well, I should start by saying I called Mr. Higgins to ask for specific details on the colors that were being proposed, and I asked for those last week. And the reply I got, and I think the rest of the commission got, was there was this narrative that was going to go out, which we just found in the dais this evening. And the narrative starts out by saying the new project architectural color scheme includes an off-white, off-white smooth stucco wall finish, et cetera. And then I heard you say that the stucco finish is a mottled white. So I just want to, again, clarify that the plans say the front and the front side of the building is an indeterminate gray plaster. That's also the color that we have in front of us without specification of a color, but they are specifying a gray color. So I would just like it to be clear that we're talking about something that's gray on the front part of the building, both on the front and the side of it. And that we still are looking for, or I am still looking for, specifics on the actual colors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I believe staff report refers to off-white.
Oh, we're going to hear from the applicant on that, too. Other questions for staff? Anybody? Mr. Quilson?
I have one. The Arcade Plaza design guidelines on page 25 talk about decorative wrought iron should be used at railings, window coverings, etc. The railings that I see that would be adjacent to the relocated walkway are described on the applicant's page A 3.1, note F, as perforated metal panel. And I'd like to understand what the difference is and whether or not it appears that the perforated metal panels meet the design guidelines which call for wrought iron. The color I don't have a problem with. Yeah. That looks to me very different from wrought iron railings. The note in the staff report, page 8 of 12, the bottom paragraph, says that the project color palette, the off-white stucco, and I agree with Commissioner Zabilla, there's no mention here of the gray plaster, although it's called out on the applicant's page A3.1, note H. But the staff report says that the off-white potentially provides differentiation to a greater degree than the design guidelines allow. I would think that a gray would be even a larger differentiation. And I'd like to know, one, why it wasn't mentioned, and two, if that's really what the applicant intends to put there, gray on part of the wall and white on part of the wall. That's all I have now, sir.
Thank you. Perhaps, Mr. Winnick, you want to reply to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman Quilisi. As the exhibit or page 3.1 indicates, the wall face of the building itself, the low wall facing Ojai Avenue, does in fact use the gray stucco. But and on the lower portion, as it returns around, that will be gray as well. But the larger volume or the larger structure to the rear uses the white stucco.
The majority of the west elevation is the off-white.
Correct, as well as
part of the west elevation and all of the south elevation are gray.
That is correct. And so the elevation facing the parking lot, the north elevation is that white, off-white color as well. And as far as the railing is concerned,
yeah,
I think you've identified the issues that
right.
The wrought iron versus the punched or perforated steel.
All right, other questions for staff? Anybody? Good. Can we hear from the applicant?
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Ben Turner. I'm here to represent the project. I'm going to be reading heavily from my notes this evening, just to try to give you the best chance of clarity. A lot of material to cover, so I'm going to run through it with the slides also. I will be answering all of the questions that came up that staff have directed to me to answer about the color and texture of materials, and we'll be addressing the railing, but it's peppered through this presentation, so bear with me. The August 8th City Council hearing ended with our being directed to return to you for your input on this design. We were asked to address several items by the commissioners that included the project's consistency with the Arcade Plaza guidelines and answer concerns about the removal of trees that provide shade for the future walkway. I'd like to run through this new PowerPoint presentation to highlight the changes we have made to the project and to address these questions and comments. The first few slides are the same as previous hearings to identify the site for the public and yourselves and the scope of work and familiarize ourselves with the existing conditions. So I'll run through those now. Here is the project area. The existing lot layout with the 9-foot alleyway, which is currently next to the building, identified. The grass area to the, well, let's just say to the left there is the future position of the 9-foot alleyway. Here are some photographs of the existing building. This is the lower front building next to Main, and how I described it as the larger rear building. The alleyway itself, the view back towards the arcade, the view towards Main Street from the rear parking lot. And now I'm moving on to the existing trees. These are the condition of the existing podocarpus trees. And here is the positioning of the trees currently on the grassed area. The slide shows the size and condition of the existing podocarpus trees. They were planted in a staggered line that varies down to 4'8" from the proposed property line. While we respect the council's wish to provide shade, the existing tree's position and condition do not, in our opinion, offer the best choice for the alley edge. We have proposed at the applicant's cost to purchase and install new trees of a different species. These 3 specimens would be Olea europa, or fruitless olive, and would be in addition to the 3 Circidium Desert Museum that we had previously proposed, which are also going to be on the patio. The proposed planted size of the olive, depicted as 19 foot tall in the rendering, would be accomplished with a 48-inch box, which would be 12 foot high with a 9-foot canopy spread at the time of planting. Time to grow to height as shown is generally 2 foot per year and should be in the 19 to 20 foot range in about 2 to 3 years. The Desert Museum tree, depicted as 24 foot tall in the rendering, will mature to that height in about 4 to 5 years. I'm going to circle back to the green wall and the vines later on in the presentation. Here is the colored version of that plan. And here are examples of those species. To create a walkway that is smooth and accessible, we will plant these trees with tree grates that match those used in the rear plaza as depicted in this slide. Moving on to the elevations. And before I continue with these slides, I would like to read some excerpts from the guide, starting with page 3 in the second paragraph of the Arcade Plaza Guideline Introduction. The Director, the Planning Commission, and the Redevelopment Commission, as appropriate, will use its discretion in applying specific guidelines in this manual to a particular project. Each guideline may not apply equally to every project. If a project is consistent with some of the guidelines and inconsistent with some others, it will be up to the Director, the Planning Commission, and the Redevelopment Commission, as appropriate, to decide if the project is consistent with the overall intent of the document. To continue, page 5, first paragraph. The purpose of the guidelines is to give clear and concise direction for the renovation of existing buildings and construction of new buildings. The intent is to create a welcoming environment that attracts shoppers and pedestrians. These guidelines offer simple solutions and recommendations to improve commercial buildings in a way that increases foot traffic and creates a unified architectural theme. The guidelines are intended to guide the creative and artistic approach of the designer rather than to stifle creativity. Page 10 of the guide speaks to the general theme and space planning for a project. The guide has several statements on the page that are appropriate to read for this project. Each property is encouraged to have its own identity, yet integrate with adjacent properties. Where possible, buildings should be orientated to create and define usable outdoor spaces. These spaces should have a variety of microclimates, such as shady, sunny, warm, cool, open, and private. Buildings abutting the arcade are encouraged to orient towards business towards plaza. This can be done with entrances, patios, awnings, windows, landscaping, and paving. Enhance large blank walls with murals, landscaping, stucco relief tiles, etc. Provide outdoor seating and tables to add to the pedestrian atmosphere in the plaza. Entries to buildings should be individualized, yet clearly identifiable, integrated with adjacent landscaping. Pedestrian walks should provide logical linkages to surrounding sidewalks, connections through parking lots, and to adjoining uses. Despite not being a blank slate project and working within site constraints, we feel the design meets with all these suggestions. The plaster color at the front building at Main Street has remained the same as previously approved scheme with the same trim and detail colors. That is the gray color that was being described. The front wall is a revised color. The front low patio wall The low patio wall here is the matching off-white to the rear building. Page 22 of the guide, describes walls and wall treatments. I'm not going to read the entire page out, but plaster finishes in a medium to light color are encouraged, with the design eliminating large blank walls. Also discouraged are color and material choices that increase glare. The guide goes on to state that buildings should keep a balanced color palette between base colors and a brighter or darker accent colors on each building. And large areas of intense light color should be avoided, while more subdued colors usually work best for overall building color. Darker accent colors are appropriate for trim, windows, doors, and key architectural elements. We feel that the combination of colors does provide a balance, with darker trim being selected to punch certain elements such as doors and windows and trim while not clashing with the body colors. The off-white color of the rear building and patio walls at Main Street and the rear of the building are shown on the material boards. The plaster color selected for the rear building is an off-white, but was chosen to eliminate glare by using an integral color instead of a painted surface, and hard troweling the finish to a level that keeps a matte surface with subtle mottling. The reason, when asked by staff to provide paint chips with color numbers to describe the gray and the off-white mottled plaster, we did not provide paint chips because the integral color is not able to be represented. It wouldn't help you, it wouldn't help in the field. A paint chip has a gloss. These colors that were provided on the material board are the very best description that we can offer. And we would be happy that staff can bring those samples to the field, if that is the Commission's request, to compare with the field application. Trellises are encouraged by the Arcade Plaza. Page 13 gives guidance saying the use of trellis along blank walls are encouraged. This will add interesting shade and shadow details and create an opportunity for climbing vines on bare walls. Heavy timber with dark-colored stains should be used for trellis structures. High-quality craftsmanship should be used on trellis structures. Also note that the picture on page 13 of the Plaza Guidelines that depicts column bases with a thickened base detail to add a sense of stability. We have reviewed the existing columns and chosen a design that is in the same style. We feel that the design matches the intent of this section. Here is the existing rear plaza detail. Ours is similar, it is taller, but a similar detail. The trellis, the proposed, is still a heavy wood construction with an oxide finish and a sealer is depicted on the materials board. A thickened base detail complementing the rear arcade is added. Detailing has been added over the door and window that are not covered by the trellis. The detail is a wood eyebrow. Also at the rear of the building over the window. Page 24 of the Plaza Guidelines features a list of materials to be avoided: highly reflective or brightly colored materials, except as accents, concrete block, smooth split face, etc., brick masonry, wood or simulated shingles or shakes, corrugated fiberglass or metal tin panels, simulated stone or masonry, vinyl or sheet metal siding, plywood, hardboard or dimensional lumber, wood and composite horizontal or vertical siding, bright whites and other colors that will create a glare. The project does not contain any bright reflective materials. The concrete block at the rear building is being coated with a plaster. There is no exterior brick apart from the alleyway. The roof is behind facades and is not shingle. There is no tin or fiberglass siding, no simulated stone, no vinyl, no plywood, no hardboard or dimensional lumber, no wood siding, and again, no finishes that will create a glare. Page 26 of your guide recommends that all railings, including stairway handrails, guardrails, and decorative railings, should be constructed of wood and metal and should be stained or painted to coordinate with other building features elements. Subtle artistic and unique accents are encouraged. Further down the page, the guide says that black or brown recommended colors for railings. The black metal railing offered has a simple geometric leaf design and is black in color. So going back to the comments that have come from commissioners to point out that it is not wrought iron, agreed, it is a metal panel with these holes stamped or laser cut through them to provide the design. We didn't feel that wrought iron matched the building and the area where we are doing our individual project, but we're happy to offer you a couple of suggestions. I didn't know that staff had determined that the 3 elements described in the staff report were items that staff didn't agree with the design on. I received the first word of that when I received the staff report, so I apologize for not bringing you options in your packet for you to look for. I have to bring them on the presentation, so I'm going to skip forward past the end of my presentation to get to those rating options for you. I chose 2 other patterns. This was the color that the picture was on their product page, so we would be doing this in the same black color, but this was a sort of a tree trunk design. And the other design was this, that I felt was perhaps more mission. So I'm open to your comments and suggestions on that when you come to your discussion portion of your hearing. Page 27 speaks to the importance of defining doorways and entries. We're not making changes to the doors and windows that are existing, and the narrow frontage on Main Street, marking the end of our property. We do not feel that the public will be confused when looking at this building, and the side patio too will be defined and will guide foot traffic to the doorways. Signage is not a part of the application, so I'll move forward to page 35 of the guidelines. The site building lights complement the building's character and create adequate lighting without glare or uplighting and not spilling light onto adjacent areas. Page 36 looks for screening of utilitarian building aspects, and we have met these by screening all roof equipment and piping. Other detailing on the project, the patio, shade cloth, gabion walls, black railings, and benches remain the same as previously submitted. The green wall or green screen depicted in renderings is approximately 11'4" above grade. This slide depicts the structure and freestanding base. The following slides show the installation and subsequent fill-in growth of the wall. So this was as installed, and then when grown in. Another example here with a stepped planter in front, and looking down that way, grown in. The landscape architect told me today that the vines selected should probably be the trumpet vine and would fill in 2 to 3 years. So that concludes my presentation on the changes that we made, and I'm ready for your questions. Thank you.
Do we have questions for the owner? Ben, I have a concern about I mean, a big part of this project is this kind of land swap that we're doing with the 9-foot wide right-of-way that's moving over. And I'm concerned about the trees that are proposed to be planted in that and how they are restricting the space that's available for pedestrians going through there. Can you kind
Speak to that, sure.
talk to that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it looks from your drawing like the trees are 4 feet out or so, so they'd be kind of in the middle of that whole space.
The original, the trees that are there go out to 4'8". Let me work my way back through the slides here. We have to keep a certain distance for accessibility. The sidewalk has to be 4 feet wide, clear, with certain intrusions allowed for a small distance. It has to be 5% forward slope, 2% maximum cross slope.
I think originally said you were going to basically reproduce the existing sidewalk in the new location, basically the same
So we're
width
moving, it's a
and-
9-foot sidewalk, or 8 foot, and then the actual brick way is, so we're putting that over there. So we're going to be planting these, and I put a note on here, note arborist and building official to determine exact location of tree and alley to ensure an accessible path width is maintained. I've currently shown the path width, 5'6" from the outside edge of the trunk. 4 foot is the code minimum for a sidewalk. And so the tree grate was an absolute necessity because we have to keep that smooth without any steps or transitions in it. So I feel that with 5'6" offered upon planting, that we're still going to have some room to grow. The city council really felt very strongly that shade was an important part of the design. So that's what we've offered.
So we're basically trading off shade for space on
Yes.
Okay, as long as we're clear on that. Other questions for the, yeah.
Yeah,
Catherine?
this is getting back to the olive trees. Most olives, when you purchase them, they're going to be low branching, which can actually impede into that space. You can, if you can find them, find a single-trunked olive commercially, but I know they're hard to find. And they don't usually come in larger box sizes. So, I don't know, I just had a little concern about that. And then the other thing is they are really close to the green screen. I mean, I know city council, I'm just coming from my perspective and my training that I love trees. I don't really necessarily see the need to have those 3 trees there because you've got the building providing afternoon shade and you are already putting the cercidiums in. But that's just my comment. If I don't necessarily see the need, and I do see them possibly impinging on the pedestrian access. And you've got the green screen, which
Is the
is providing
aesthetic.
that green wall in the shade of the building. But
So I'm dancing here. I'm dancing between two bodies. I would envisage that the green wall, it looks to be quite a heavy structure. Yes, it's covered, it's grown around, but the actual structure itself has to be substantial enough. 11-foot fall is a tall lever. And so I think we're going to have to break that green wall for the trunk width and a little bit of clearance. And so we'll have to, we're going to have those downstand columns going to have to be regularly spaced anyway. So there's an opportunity to space it with it looking right, I'm hoping.
that sounds a little better.
I have a question.
Yeah, was it?
Ben, how tall is the green screen?
11'4"
How
approximately.
tall is the dip down from Bonnie Lou's where it is it meant just to crest that?
Love
and
that.
It just crests that,
It
yes.
just crests it, so
goes.
it doesn't actually hide that.
So the
equipment.
tree positions, sorry, I'm going to get the laser here. This tree position here and here depicts the 2 portions where there's a break in that wall and it dips down. That's where the HVAC equipment is. So the green wall covers past the top of the wall, but the trees are really what I'm using to really make that area disappear.
And do you know that you can get like 24-inch box trees? Do we know if they come in that size? I don't know if that's.
I think it was larger than that. It was a
Okay.
48-inch box
Okay.
tree that was specified.
I didn't see that specified.
Okay, other questions? I have to say, nobody else is jumping in here, but I don't like the screen that you have proposed for the, I don't know what you call it there, the railing.
Okay.
Yeah.
The railing,
I
yes.
did like what you showed us there with the tree trunk kind of design, but I think the one that you have on the plans would not be appropriate, but that's my particular opinion.
I'll get there in a minute. It's just at the end.
There.
Here we are.
Yeah. That, to me,
I agree.
looks reasonable, but I don't think the other screen that you have proposed would qualify as wrought iron or anything in that nature, whereas this looks more like that. Rosalie?
A couple more questions, Ben. When I read the motion from City Council, it, to me, instructed you to rework option C, which was basically a white, you actually specified the white in that case, and the trim. You specified the colors there. West Highland white is the facade color with taupe and cafe trim. So what I see here is that you brought back option B with some changes.
So the City Council didn't instruct me to bring option C back. Instructed me to reevaluate the project with the Planning Commission with an eye to meeting the spirit and intent of the guidelines.
So did you not see the motion? Because the motion specifically mentions option C.
Then we didn't follow the instruction of the City
Okay,
Council.
just clarifying that. And then the other thing is, I'm just having a hard time with this idea that a building inspector is going to hope to, this is all going to hope to stay in a file, and for some reason we can't have the actual name of the color. Every other applicant manages to have the name of the colors, and I just find it hard to believe that we're going to rely on this to stay in the file, or this to stay in the file, and then that's how we're going to ensure compliance with what's been approved, would it be to be approved. Why can't we have the names of the colors?
There is no name of a color with an integral custom plaster color like this. We looked at other products that, for example, La Habra has a color chart of integral color for cement products, but there really wasn't a color on there that we felt was right for this project. And on top of that, when you mix plaster, because of the different nature of the aggregates themselves and which plant you got the cement mix from, it's going to adjust the color. So if I brought along a La Habra color code, you would be facing the same problem in field of taking a chip to field and does it match?
Well, how were you able to designate the color in option C then?
Option C, it may have been a paint color.
So I think it's a bit of a stretch to ask the commission to rely on that level of
I felt there was
organization.
no better way to give you a chance to review than giving you the real product.
It's great to have the real product. It's just
No problem.
something I haven't seen in 4 years, that there's not a clear color specified, so that it's part of the condition of approval.
If I could have provided a code, I wouldn't. It wasn't through malicious intent or wanted to make anybody's life difficult, but we wanted that quality product. If that quality product isn't matched with a code, I apologize, but it doesn't exist.
If I understand correctly, it's basically plaster, like
Yes.
the raw
Yeah.
cement plaster if you hadn't
Really,
painted it.
the skill of the plasterer, which is why we got the plasterer we're going to use on the job, the skill of the plasterer is critical to the finish. And if I specified on a set of plans, as I have many times, a 7/8 inch stucco coat, when I get to field, I'm going to get a huge variety of difference. So it's my job too, as well as a field inspector, to make sure the quality matches the plan and the client is happy with the results.
From my extensive experience in this area, there's no better way than to have an actual sample than to match a color on a swatch that's about 2 inches big on an omega chart. So it is, for a custom color like this, there is no other way. Putting this on file should be no problem whatsoever, and going out and modeling it to match is actually the best way. And I've done hundreds of these types of structures.
The problem is that we've had other projects come back that the public and the staff felt had deviated from their conditions of approval, from what their permit dictated. And we were in the position of having to review extensively and repeatedly to try to render a judgment in that case. And I think that is, the problem. That costs us a lot of time and a lot of energy. And to say that little piece of, exhibit over there is then going to somehow be the standard by which this whole thing rises or falls, and that it remains in the file is a bit of a stretch, I think.
Okay. Any other, yeah, Ray?
I'm challenged by a few things. I think the most basic is what Commissioner Zabilla referred to, was the meeting notes from the city council, where there was, and you just said you didn't follow it, was explicit direction to apply the Arcade Plaza design guidelines in an integrated fashion, particularly regarding design option C. It was further moved that staff provide the Planning Commission with a detailed staff report, clearly listing details that are mandatory per the APDG and details that are merely suggested. It was further moved that the applicant be subject to no more design review fees, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what occurred at the city council meeting. Then we received the memorandum that the applicant has withdrawn design option C. However, that's exactly what council asked for you to revise, and you replaced it with this single option, which I agree is more like the previous version B. So that's very confusing. It reminds me, I was reading this today, brief story. I won't take up too much time, but when I was in music conservatory, we were asked to write a Bach fugue, and to make a Bach fugue, the last two measures have to cadence exactly like Bach for it to sound like Bach. That was our assignment. Me being a rebellious 17-year-old in college, didn't do it that way, and I didn't follow the guidelines. And they're like, well, why didn't you follow the guidelines? Well, I kind of did what I wanted, and I thought this sounded better. So it kind of felt like that, like there was a directive. C is what works. Was the most harmonious in the word, and I get that harmonious is used somewhat interpretively in the guidelines. I don't know. I guess I'm not here to berate you. I'm just surprised to hear you say, "Oh, I didn't hear that," or "We didn't follow it," or
the comments from the commissioners, from the council members, also dealt heavily with the fact that they didn't feel it was their position to review the design. In fact, several times, and I reviewed this video again today, they said, "Well, I'm beginning to sound like a planning commissioner."
right.
And so the intent of sending it back to the design review board, the people that review the design, was to do just that. They seemed to be more interested in how the guidelines that they had enacted were being followed and how staff were processing the applications, as opposed to giving me explicit design advice. They wanted you to do that because that isn't their position.
Well, I hear what you're saying. Though the minutes of the meeting says explicit direction to apply the APDG regarding design option C. That's pretty explicit. So I don't know what to do with this design. It feels like, oh, now here's a fourth option for us to look at.
All right, Chester?
I have a question for staff. Does this current design, in your opinion, and I assume the answer is yes because you're recommending approval, meet, in your professional opinion, the arcade guidelines?
Overall, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Bobby?
I watched that city council meeting pretty closely, and while they did mention the possibilities of option C, they did time and time again say that the design wasn't their purview. And when the applicant asked in what possible way they were in violation of the plaza guidelines, city council said, that's not our purview. And it's, the applicant has every right to bring in a design that they want us to approve. I went through the guidelines again, and I think that this project meets the criteria. The point of the plaza guidelines is to create a sense of place, a town square, a comfortable place to interact and enjoy. It does that. It talks about mission architecture, which is simple in design and ornament, and it is that. It's simple, square, or rectangular with smooth plaster. They created usable outdoor spaces. There are semi-private spaces linking outdoor to indoor with trellises. There is human scale, balance, and proportion. Large walls are enhanced by architectural details. Smooth surfaces, medium to light earth tones. So I looked up earth tones and I found a color scheme that draws from a color palette of browns, tans, gray, green, orange, white, and some reds and blues, in emulation of natural colors found in dirt, moss, trees, and rocks. There's another part of the guideline that said there should be a blend for renovations, a blend of historic materials and today's technology, which I think the screening meets. I think that one's nice and natural. I think the one you originally picked also looks like leaves. To me, it's not modern. It looks very natural. I think either of those two will blend beautifully with landscaping. Bright or dark accent colors with light base colors are recommended. Dark colors for trim windows and doors. For the decorative iron railings, black is recommended. But they also mention artistic accents and unique accents are encouraged. Well, I think the screens definitely meet that. First floor should have storefront windows to distinguish it as a public space. And there is definitely a storefront window on Ojai Avenue. I think the applicant has done himself a disservice by making the window and the door look like the same color as the plaster, so somebody not quite savvy enough to read the plan might think the whole wall is gray. Well, it's not. Most of it's glass. The gray is such a small part of this. It's like much ado about nothing. And I think that at this point, they've been working on this project for 2 years. One of the things that came up at the Building Appeals Committee meeting that I had to attend, and that I will report on later, talked about the excessive fees and the fact that every time we ask somebody to reconsider and reconsider and reconsider and give us a study, we should be really certain that that's what they need to do, because we add thousands of dollars onto the cost of every project. They're trying to do a nice project here. I believe that it is in compliance with the Ojai Arcade Plaza guidelines, which I've read multiple times. It's very simple. I think it's also interesting that the historical tourism of Santa Barbara was mentioned in our staff report. I've spent a lot of time in Santa Barbara recently. I think, now I don't have a factual note for this, but I think that by consensus, people feel that Santa Barbara is one of the most beautiful places in this country. And we have the impression of it being Spanish. And I've been walking up and down State Street, and there are many buildings that are not Spanish, but that are compatible. And they are large versions of this building. They're simple, they're plastered, they have cornices, they have trim that accentuates the windows, and they're plain. And they look perfectly fine with the buildings that are Spanish. So I would really like to see us move this along and pass this project.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments by commissioners? Yeah, Commissioner Nolan?
Thank you, Commissioner Corbin. I'm in agreement. I do think we could, I would vote for this second option on the railing or partition with the tree pattern. I think it might be a little more compatible, although I'm not opposed to the first one. I reviewed the plant palette, which they had introduced, early on, and it's all essentially low water use, very compatible with our climate here, so I'm in agreement with that. And I'm also in agreement with the lot line adjustment.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I don't know if you agree with this, but I think putting those trees in the walkway is a mistake. I don't think it's necessary for the shade, for the shape of the alley, the narrowness of it, and the way the sun moves through it. I think you were compelled to do it, and I think it's a mistake. I think the thoroughfare, the throughway there is more important with that huge 11-foot green wall, and the other trees that you have planted in there should be completely suffice. So that's my opinion, and also if we're gonna just jump in on the railing, I prefer the wood-looking, the branch-looking railing myself.
Thank you.
I agree with you about the trees.
Okay. Mr. Quilisi, I'd like to actually move on to
Okay.
public comment, because unless we have specific questions, for staff, okay?
I'm not clear for some reason what this means. It's page 8 of 12. At the bottom, referring to the guidelines, page 23, 24. And in blue, it says, colors in this section of the planning document recommend coordination with other buildings and that avoid bright white over large areas. I understand this, but I don't understand the sentence. In this way, the project color palette, the off-white stucco base for wall treatment, for example, potentially provides differentiation to a greater degree than the APDG allows. I don't know what that means.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that was just to suggest that a more tan color was the predominant color of other buildings in the plaza. This would be more of a differentiation.
And the plaza, not the arcade.
Yeah.
The arcade's white, the plaza is tan.
Yes.
I think that one of the things about the material, the plaster, and the way it's applied is it's definitely not going to be like a stark white that, you're going to have different colors running through it. Yeah. You can see a little bit of that on there.
Burned-in trowel finish.
All right.
We've won many awards in the city of Ojai for using that very finish.
Really?
Just to let you know.
So would you be okay if
I just had one question
okay,
for
if you have
staff.
one question, that'd be great.
Going back to the staff report, page 10 of 12, the last paragraph entitled Tree Permit/Removal. I'm confused by that. It says on the third line, therefore, the tree permit application can be withdrawn, but there do appear to be new trees proposed, at least half a dozen. And I'm not understanding, what did the tree permit that was withdrawn cover?
It would have applied to trees that were actually larger sizes and are currently on the site. So it was superfluous at that point. It was non-applicable.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. I do have a speaker's card, so I'd like to hear from... Oh, good. Okay. Dawn gets to speak first, though, because she got her... So, Dawn?
Hi.
Thanks for waiting all this time.
No problem. Hi, I'm Dawn Shook, 309 Mallory Way. I've spoken many times regarding the proposed renovation of 334 East Ojai Avenue. I work next to the building, and I'm looking forward to a beautiful addition to downtown. My emails to everyone have stated I do believe we should follow the Arcade Plaza design guidelines when reviewing any remodels in downtown Ojai. Navajo white, stucco exterior, tile or brick, and wooden accents actually complement the arcade. Ojai is the jewel of the Ojai Valley and brings those of us who visit, live, and/or work in downtown Ojai. Any deviations from the Arcade Plaza design guidelines set precedents for any and all future remodels in downtown Ojai. I also have concerns, I was listening to the trees, just regarding the types of trees and the size of trees. I have olives in my house, fruitless, and they still drop olives. Anyway, I just want to, it's a very sunny area there. It gets very hot in the summertime, even though there is some shade. Actually, the trees are the shade, the ones that are there. Anyway, and also I have a issue with how long the project will take, and also how will we allow pedestrians to access either the back of the arcade stores or the Ojai Avenue stores while construction is ongoing, and how we can change that to keep everyone flowing back and forth, because I know there's stores in the back that are going to suffer because they won't be able to get back there easily. And yes, there is the tunnel, but I don't know if a lot of people maybe know about the tunnel and how it all works. So I'm just, expressing my concerns.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. And Dale?
Yes, I'm Dale Hansen. I live in the city of Ojai. I'm really happy that we're going to have that nice restaurant. I hope it's good Italian food, and I like the open air feeling of it. What I don't like, though, is the hardscape look. The rest of the arcade is not like that. It's soft and flowing, and that has a very squared off hardscape. It doesn't make me feel good. I have no design background, but it doesn't make me feel good when I look at it. It doesn't feel like the rest of Ojai. The arcade, with the look that it gives, is like a cornerstone of Ojai. As a realtor, it does help us sell. It brings people here. They love this town. And I think that the trees, I agree that I don't think those trees in the walkway are necessary. I think they impede traffic to the folks in the back. And I would really like to see a softening, and I totally agree. I serve on the BAB, and we did say we don't like to send you guys back to spend more money. I know what that's like, but can't we look a little bit more like the arcade, a little softer? I'd love that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Anybody else like to speak on this? Mr. Becker, you sure you don't want to jump in here?
I don't think so.
Probably just as well. Thank you. Hang on, Ben. Let me. So I'm going to close the public hearing. But Ben, did you want to respond to some of those?
Thank you. I just wanted to offer that it'd be the intent to keep a public walkway open during construction for as long as is safe. We would have to put down some sort of surface treatment, some sort of temporary surface, whether that be, probably wouldn't be plywood, that doesn't actually work out very well, but there are products you can use steel, or there actually is a plastic temporary walkway that locks together that we use on construction sites to keep pedestrian. We just have to be very mindful of the maneuvering if there's a position where larger vehicles are on site. But I think that most of the work is actually not going to be accomplished with heavy excavating equipment. There's not grading and pushing around of large materials. It's mostly a lot of handwork with those bricks and, of course, installation of the rail. Don't foresee a lot of powerful equipment on there. So hopefully we'll be able to keep that walkway open at 4 foot wide, strip at least, for a great duration through the project.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, because the walkway is almost like a separate project. Is that something you could do kind of first? Like get the walkway down and then work on the, I don't know.
We're going to have to think about that, but you're right. There's an opportunity to stage it so that we do one, then we do the other. I got to really speak to the contractors and work out the best way, but the intent is there to make this as not an obnoxious eyesore, but really to keep it safe and a thoroughfare present.
Yeah, I think the big concern is having pedestrians still able to get access to the back there.
And I agree that the tunnel further along, I mean, I know about it, but it isn't sometimes all that inviting, particularly when it's darker, to walk through that way. Not that the alleyway is currently much better. We're hoping that it's going to really improve with extra lighting and a wider open area. But
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you. Depends on who's singing in the alleyway. So we've closed the public hearing. We'll bring it back to the commission. Do we have further discussion, or would someone like to make a motion? Well, we have further discussion. All right. Ray, jump in.
Page,
Everybody holler because my hearing.
page 9, I have a question for Mr. Winiger, page 9 of 12. It refers to page 26 of the guidelines, and the last sentence, it's staff's opinion that the railing may also be too modern and unique for that special harmonious balance with the APDG area. Are you referring to what I'm seeing on the LCD screen? Are you referring to the one that looked like leaves? Are you referring to metal altogether? What is that in reference to?
Specifically, it was in reference to the original proposal, the leave option, if you will. The guidelines make specific reference to wrought iron, but I think these are guidelines. I think the commission has latitude to determine what does comply.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to get clear on what staff had to say about that. In terms of the lot lines and the land swap? And the land swap and the lot line, is that the purview of the commission, of the council? Who discusses those?
It's council.
That's what
The
I thought.
decision rests with the council. The
Okay.
council, to be very clear, has the decision on all of this because it involves city land, but the commission has the power to recommend approval and must evaluate recommending or not recommending approval of the lot line adjustment and the entering into the development agreement that facilitates the land swap. So it's a recommendation from the commission and a decision by the council. In that consideration, the commission should bear in mind that the primary purview of the planning commission is planning aspects as opposed to the finances.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm a little challenged with that because the lot lines are, in our report, and the land swaps in our report, yet so it's collapsed in there, yet I don't know enough to know what benefits the city and what doesn't in terms of swapping land, selling land, like how that works, and what benefits the city most. But yet if we approve this, we're approving a land swap too. Now, I understand council has final say.
Right, it wouldn't be an approval by the commission, it's a recommendation by the commission.
Right.
It lies within the council's purview to evaluate the benefits to the public that derive from the project as opposed to the benefits to the public that derive from maintaining the existing land ownership structure. But the commission's purview would be to evaluate the general plan to see, is it recommend, and in fact determine whether or not it's consistent with the general plan to switch the land as is proposed, and to evaluate the design aspects and the other pieces of the zoning code. But the question of, does the land swap present sufficient value to justify doing it for the city? That's a question uniquely within the city council's power.
Yeah, I almost wish it were removed from the rest of the design, because it's,
Just can't be.
I know,
Just
I
be a part of it.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we leave that all.
It's
up to
all a
the
bit of
city.
a package, but each has their role.
All right, other comments, Mr. Quilting?
Thank you. With regard to staff's concern that the off-white stucco potentially provides differentiation to a greater degree than the APDG allows, I understand the point of view. I understand that the plaza is primarily tans, but this particular building, while it's technically included in the plaza, and the plaza design guidelines. It also fronts on Ojai Avenue, and it sits between the arcade, which is white, and Ms. Shook's building, which is white. And so I feel that in this case, that would be an allowable differentiation, because while it's plaza design guidelines, the project itself is located in a place that I think is more compatible with a white surface. I do take exception to the gray. I don't see Commissioner Corbin's definition of earth tones does include gray, but I didn't see it anywhere in the design guidelines. And I would prefer not to see gray around the front of this, particularly where it fronts on Ojai Avenue, because everything else that fronts on Ojai Avenue is white or dark brown. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I concur with you that, yes, the overarching guideline is the Arcade Plaza guideline, and I also agree with you that because of the unique location of this property, and it's facing Ojai Avenue, and it's adjacent to the arcade, that should be, in addition to meeting the guidelines, looked at. That being said, if you walk down the arcade, of course the arcade itself is one consistent color. Mind you, the pergola across the street is a lighter white. So you're going to find different shades of white. But in addition,
Find gray anywhere else on Ojai
in
Avenue?
addition, if you look at each storefront, they're all going to be different, and there's quite a few that have either a very light gray, a darker gray, almost a purple plum black gray, a taupe, which is a kind of a brown gray.
Grayish
There
brown,
are quite a few that do. In addition, if you walk around into the plaza area, you're going to find differentiation with all the ironwork. Some of it is wrought iron, some of it's kind of faded out. There's also like a glossy, more modern iron back there. There's quite a hodgepodge, or just a variety. I don't even want to say hodgepodge, but there's a variety of different elements. I do feel like the palette that they've presented here does meet the guidelines for the plaza, but in addition is compatible and complements the storefronts on Ojai Avenue, including those that are in the arcade. That's my opinion.
And I'd like to add that there
Justin?
is a few storefronts that have gray stone in front of them. River Rock, Barbara Bowman's place, next to the movie theater.
Next to,
Well, around the movie theater, across the street.
okay.
And how about the Oaks? I don't think that's white by any,
No, but it's
any
not,
close
it-
imagine.
it's not in the Arcade Plaza either.
Okay, but still, if you're talking about, oh, yeah, that's true. That is true.
And I've said, I think the white that's here is an acceptable deviation from the plaza guidelines because of the placement of the project.
Okay.
It was the gray that I was objecting to. And I agree with the applicant that the design guidelines say railings should be constructed of wood or metal, and we can go on and talk about it. What's recommended is wrought iron. And so that would be what I would favor as being more compatible with the design guidelines. So those are the only places where I would take issue with the design would be the gray and the railings. I would agree either of the alternative railings that we've just seen little pictures of here would be better than the stylized leaves cut into the railing. I agree with that. I would have one suggestion also. As I look at the south elevation, it shows the address 334 over that door that's on the end of the building. And I found that a little confusing. No one's going to be entering this space, I think, under the address, even though there's a door there. And if the address were at the west end of that front wall, I think it might be more inviting. People would say, oh, this is where 334 is. It's this walkway and these businesses along the walkway.
But they never
So-
see it driving
I believe that has to do
No.
with,
That would be for foot traffic.
fire
not for
department has to
Auto
have
traffic.
that.
And that's
Correct.
just.
The address
just
has to face-
A random thought, yeah.
Has to face the street.
Okay, I'm done.
All right, good. Would anyone like to make a motion? Ray, discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify what Commissioner Quillisi said. Is it the gray just on the south-facing front that is a consideration for you, or the gray everywhere is
It's-
a consideration for you?
It's the gray on the west elevation and on the south elevation.
Okay, on both.
I don't recall seeing any gray anywhere else in the Arcade Plaza, and I may be wrong. My memory is often faulty in these things, but that was my objection.
Yeah, and that brings a question I had for Commissioner Nolan. So when you mentioned these different colors you saw in the stores, were they trims or were they whole storefronts that are gray?
It's actually a mix if you go out there. Each storefront within the arcade is actually very unique. Some of them,
This is-
you know.
The
materi-
storefronts facing Ojai Avenue?
Yeah. The arcade, of course, is consistent, but the storefronts themselves each are individually unique in materials and color palette and what have you. So it's a combination of, but there are various tones of gray. Then, of course, when you're in the arcade plaza, you have brick, you've got wood, there's some more contemporary looking iron.
There's smaller surfaces as well. This is,
Yeah.
much bigger,
Well-
this west face.
actually,
is
I like to address that.
area.
It's not big at all. You're seeing a gray, big, giant window there. And that appears to make it look more gray than it is. If you really take out where the windows are, you're talking about like 2-3 foot strips of gray. And it's really nothing. So,
Could you put up the south elevation again? Yeah.
Yes, I'll do that on the screen as well. I just wanted to,
Microphone Turner.
I wanted to cross this out, and then I'll pull it up on the screen as well for everybody else.
glass.
Glass.
Here we are.
So that's glass, and the door is glass.
Is that intended as an entrance to a retail space?
Yes, that's an
Don't know
opportunity. Well, it depends upon the design, yes, of the internal layout, whether they want to come in on the side of the front, but potentially, yes.
Mr. Chair, prior to a motion, if I can make a quick comment.
As long as it's small, quick, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Just a point to clarify that I think is useful, for the record of nothing else. With respect to the council's direction in the August 8th hearing, the council directed the applicant to return and staff to return with an analysis of design option C, further analyzing it against all of the specifics of the Arcade Plaza guidelines. Subsequent to that, the applicant chose to withdraw all three previous options, A, B, and C, replace it with a new design, as before you tonight. As a result of that, the commission has the option to recommend denial and say that this is inconsistent with the council's direction to reevaluate option C, further refining it. The commission also has the power to say that notwithstanding the applicant's deviation from council's direction, this is still consistent with the design guidelines and the findings for DRP and the other permits. So the commission has that option in as well. In doing so, evaluate the points that have already been evaluated. But I just wanted to note that where we stand with respect to the council's direction to evaluate further option C. The applicant is the entity who chose to withdraw option C, as is an applicant's right, as always, to withdraw or change their project design. Thank you.
Thank you. So does anyone want to make a motion on this?
I
Or do you
have
want to discuss
some
it more?
comments.
You have more
I
comments?
do. I
All
have
right.
some comments.
All right.
I've been very
All
quiet,
right.
if you've noticed. So, no surprise, my opinion on this, because it's not really different from the last time. I feel that this design violates the Arcade Plaza design guidelines, and I also feel that it directly flies in the face of what the city council required us to look at and the applicant to comply with. So I think out the gate, this violates what the council instructed us to do. I was there. They absolutely let the final decisions up to us, but they were quite clear that they wanted to see option C reworked, not option B reworked. I'm still struggling with this idea that we have no clarity on the actual colors. But ultimately, I feel that the plaza guidelines that have been cited tonight were truly cherry-picked, and I'd like to, unfortunately, run them down and use the actual quotes from the guidelines. The intro pages to the guidelines instruct us to strive for unity between the arcade and the buildings surrounding it, and to further the mission revival theme. I'm going to quote several sentences from the guidelines. This document provides a clear set of guidelines to strengthen the mission revival architectural character of the surrounding buildings and unify the plaza. The Arcade Plaza buildings not only frame the plaza area, but are key to creating the mission revival theme that unify the plaza area. All applications within the guideline boundary shall be reviewed to ensure consistency with these guidelines. These guidelines offer simple solutions to create a unified architectural theme. The Ojai Avenue Arcade and Pergola exemplify the mission revival architectural style that is desired for the Arcade Plaza area. Architecture surrounding the plaza should be both unified with the downtown Ojai Mission Revival architectural style and support the design of the plaza itself. Through repetition of the Mission Revival architectural elements, the plaza area will be unified with a consistent theme. The arcade and the buildings surrounding it, as we've sort of discussed, are white, tan, ochre. The base of the arcade is a Navajo white. The other colors of those storefronts, there are, yes, many different trim colors, but the surrounding arcade is obviously white. The side of the building is white. It is white. When you drive through town and you ask them, what does it look like? They'll say it's white with a bunch of arches. Employing gray as the base color for the facade and accenting with black trim, along with the straight lines and absolutely no articulation in the front, creates contrast, not unity, nor a sense of timelessness. It says, look at me, I'm different, I'm contemporary. The guidelines are specific where it comes to walls and facades. Quoting again, the articulation and material use on a building facade should be appropriate to the mission style. Smooth and Spanish mission-styled stucco surfaces with tile accents are encouraged. Building facades and walls should have subdued medium to light colors with darker, richer, and brighter colors used as accents or special features. I don't consider black to be bright. The material palette for building in the plaza should reflect the materials commonly found and used in the region, including those used in the area's historically significant buildings. Although the selected building materials will play a large part in establishing a design character, the appropriate architectural detailing of these materials will ensure that the plaza has a feeling of quality, permanence, and timelessness. Still quoting, materials should also complement the mission revival architecture in the area. Natural materials such as stone, terracotta tiles, and wood should be used throughout the plaza. Colorful tile, ornamental glass, stucco, and wrought iron detailing should be used to accent areas and bring color to the design. Cement plaster in medium to light muted earth tones, glazed or unglazed tiles, mosaic, stone used as accents. Colors should be coordinated with adjacent buildings. Colors should complement natural unpainted materials used on the facade, such as pressure-treated wood, terracotta, and tile. I think option C was a much better start at meeting these criteria. The staff report also notes the design strays from the guidelines for architectural details and accents. The black trim and Bach modern railing that will traverse the entire length of the paseo in particular is not at all what was intended by the guidelines, nor is the lack of tile. Again quoting, decorative wrought iron should be utilized at railings. wrought iron, ornamental ironwork at windows, railings, etc. Glazed or unglazed ceramic or clay tile in rich colors at window and door surrounds. Terracotta tiles, wrought iron, ornamental ironwork at windows, railings, etc. Alcoves or niches common to Mission Revival elements are encouraged. The design, again with its gray and black facade with no front articulation and large, paneless, repeating windows flush with the adjacent walls, also violate the guidelines with respect to entries, windows, doors, and roofs. Quoting, entries should incorporate one or more of the following: a change in the wall plane or wall articulation around the door, placement of art or decorative detailing at the entry, a projecting element above the entrance, recessed doors, archways, or cased openings. It goes on, windows flush with adjacent wall plane are discouraged. Multi-pane windows that are consistent with the Mission style are encouraged. Windows and doors should be recessed into the wall. Windows flush with adjacent and wall plane are discouraged. Sorry, I said that already. All windows, including storefront windows, should be recessed to create pronounced shadow lines. A rhythm created by multiple window openings is common in Mission Revival architecture and is encouraged. Arched openings or windows are appropriate to the desired style of the Ojai Arcade Plaza. Divide storefront windows into a series of vertical windows. Large window panes are discouraged. Though the materials are as important, it is the profile and proportion, parentheses, width, of the window frames that reflect the desired Mission Revival style. Acceptable frame colors include off-white and medium to dark earth-toned colors, not black. Roofs. Parapets are encouraged on flat roofs. Mission-style Revival incorporates parapets with S-shaped forms. Recommended roof materials include clay or integrally colored concrete roof tiles, terracotta, and other red earth tone roof tiles. I have a lot of other questions, like why are we giving them land? Where's the utility area for garbage? Etc. But I obviously have so many problems with this design and the development agreement that I can only hope these questions will be answered when a more acceptable design is presented. I just want to complete my comments by talking about the Ojai brand and the economics behind why we need to zealously guard it. An error was made when this property was purchased. They thought they were buying the building with the adjacent lot, but instead bought the building and the lot next to Bonnie Lou. Property owner is asking this community for a huge boon in requesting that we swap parcels with them rather than requiring them to pay for the land that they want. I have yet to determine a discernible benefit to the city by this land swap, and question why any of us would think it is a fair trade-off to give them the land but not require them to create a design consistent with the guidelines. And I mean really consistent, not just consistent because some are trying to torture the facts into supporting the applicant. We have these particular guidelines in this place not only because we love and respect our cultural heritage, but because Ojai is a brand. The staff report and the many letters received from the public allude to our heritage tourism, that people come here for the old-time, small-town look and feel. The economic facts insist we maintain the timeless look of this area because it's essential to the economic health of our downtown community. We have something that works for everyone. Why should we take any risk whatsoever with it? I think it is irresponsible and unnecessary, and I urge my fellow commissioners to not only deny this, but to require the applicant to get real with respect to our brand. I believe this applicant has the skill to bring back something both beautiful and timeless, and I don't think we should accept anything less for Ojai.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Commissioner Corbin.
It was my understanding from reading the arcade guidelines that a lot of what you read applied to a building that would be built from scratch, and that this, in fact, is a renovation of an existing building. So unless you want them to rip it down and rebuild it.
That's incorrect, Commissioner Corbin.
All right, we're ready for a motion. Would someone like to propose one? Ray, come on. I'm going to make you give us a motion in a minute here. If you keep
No, I just have a quick comment. And, you know, I want to thank Commissioner Zabilla because, you know, that was somewhat of a risk reading that. I'm glad you wrote it so you could read it and articulate it the way you did. You know, some of the challenge with approving designs like this is, for me, is I like the design. I don't think it meets the guidelines. So as a commissioner, to serve the community and serve the guidelines, that has to be my priority, not my personal opinion on what the design is or if I like the way something looks. In another area, I would love this building. In this area, I feel the guidelines and serving the community in maintaining the heritage look takes precedence. And I just encourage my fellow commissioners who like a design and go, I like that design, to possibly put that aside and really apply the guidelines to see if it really matches.
Just remember that the commissioners that may or may not support that have a vast experience with design, architecture. We have architects right here. So you're challenging not only those opinions, but you're also challenging the staff who are qualified, who also have determined that they meet the guidelines. So with that said, this project does meet the guidelines. They're just interpreted in a different way for you.
Commissioner Corbin?
The other thing I want to say about the guidelines is that the very first paragraph says that the purpose is to create a sense of place, which is not done by tile or any specific color. It's done by form and shape. And if you want to say that we're giving them a piece of land, they are giving us a sense of place by taking a very strange parcel that really serves no real purpose and creating a sense of place there that can be useful, that will be well lit, that one would feel comfortable walking down at night. And I think that that is the main purpose of the guideline, not to say the building should be blue or the building should be gray or it should be 6 feet or it should be 2 feet. It's to create a sense of place, and I think this definitely does that.
Commissioner Isabella?
Commissioner Jagiello, I'd just like to respond to your comment. If we are simply just going off what staff or the city attorney says, then why do we need a planning commission? I don't need to be here. If the answer is always, hey, if they say it's a good thing, let's do it. I mean, we've already been instructed that that is not what we're here to do, is take staff or the city attorney's word for it. We are here to make a distinction, draw our own conclusions based on the guidelines.
Exactly. So let's take a vote. What I'm saying is that with the combination of city staff and certain professionals here on the Planning Commission, and don't look back, I have an extensive record, and I'll compare it to anyone here, of building in this valley for over 20 years, okay, and working with the top architects. So there are opinions that collaborate that, and they're professional opinions.
I didn't hear you refer. I didn't hear you make.
To all due respect, Ray has no experience with construction. He has aesthetic experience, and his intuitiveness is saying he likes the design.
And yet you made not one reference to the arcade design guidelines yourself in supporting your position.
That wasn't my point, though.
Well, that is the point.
No.
That is the point.
I think that has been adequately demonstrated that they meet the guidelines.
I think everybody needs to adequately demonstrate it themselves if they're going to vote for the project.
I have already done that for myself, so let's vote on it.
Well, first we need a motion. Would you like to make one, Chester?
Yeah, give me 1 second here to gather my thoughts. Actually, could I just bring up one thing? I actually sent it out today to fellow commissioners and Mr. Winiger, and it was a condition that I wanted to add, and it was, and I'm sorry I don't have the section right in front of me in our code, but, and I do believe the applicant had brought this up at one of our previous meetings, that they were going to add bicycle parking. Okay, good. All right. So I might have missed it when I went through the package, but I wanted to make sure that got included per our code in the conditions of approval. All right. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, but I'm going to include a couple items. Okay, so I'm going to recommend that the Planning Commission approve design review permit DRP 15-12, lot line adjustment LLA 17-01, notice of exemption and development agreement DA 17-01 between the City of Ojai and Shanks Investment Group LLC for the exchange of property to relocate the Paseo and the construction of patio space for outdoor dining located at 334 East Ojai Avenue. I'm not sure, do I need to read those parcel numbers? We're good on that. All right, and so the couple items that I wanted to make sure we included, of course, was the bicycle parking, to eliminate the olive trees, and then to go for the, I'm going to call it the tree branch option for the railing, and that's in the tricorn black. That would be the coating on it, or its surface material.
Okay. Anyone want to second that motion? Commissioner
second.
Corbin. Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Good.
And I've mentioned some of this to staff already. I have some things that I would like to see in the resolution. First of all, on attachment A, which is the resolution, page 4 of 12, there's a whereas that lists a bunch of findings. There are findings related to any property fronting on a state highway, which this does, that are found in the code 10-2.2009E regarding development plans and state highways. And I find nothing objectionable in there, but I think that there's a list of 6 or 8 findings that I think need to be added to the resolution so that we understand that that portion of the code has been complied with. Second, on attachment A, page 7, condition 11, a separate signage plan for the project and for directional signage and other signs shall be approved prior to the issuance of a building or grading permit. I'm not sure, and this is a question for staff, how do you do a signage plan before you have tenants in a building? I think when the time comes to occupy retail or other space in this building, that would be the appropriate time to require a signage plan, and that therefore we could do without condition 11. Also, the City Council proposed resolution, section 4E, says no new signages are proposed. And there again, we have a situation where the council has agreed that there's no new signage proposed. I don't know how we can require a separate signage plan.
What reference was that? I'm sorry.
That was the City Council proposed resolution, section 4E, says no new signage are proposed. And I would agree, at least from what we've seen here, there is no new signage proposed at this time, other than perhaps the address 334 above the door that fronts on Ojai Avenue. And I would suggest that we add those other findings with 10.2.209E, and that we delete condition 11, and would ask the motion maker and the seconder if those are appropriate amendments to your motion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just address
Yeah.
those. We did look at the findings in that section. Some of them have been covered by recommended findings, but we would come back with, or we would add the appropriate additional findings per that
Okay,
section.
great.
Condition number 11 regarding the signage program is typically applies to multi-tenant buildings. It would not specify the tenants or the specifics, but it is an allocation of the sign area and the sign locations. So it's generic in the sense of where the signage would go.
Okay, and there are rules about how much of the front you can cover with signs and
Correct. And so-
Then I withdraw any objection to condition 11.
Yeah, I would prefer that we retain that.
So what sounds like I need to add to,
There are 6 or 8 findings
Yeah.
that I would contend go on page 4 of 12 that relate to specifics of 10-2.2009E.
okay, so let's use that language, and
I've read it a couple of times, and I think that all of those findings are appropriate. I mean, 2009E says when you are talking about property that is adjacent to a state highway, then you must make the following findings. And I think we can, it's just not in the resolution right now.
All right. So, Ms. Nolan, you're,
So but we're going to leave condition 11, and then staff is going to pursue the findings
all right.
per the language you
And
just.
Commissioner Corbin, you're okay
shared.
with those changes? All right. Any further discussion? Sherry, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Nolan,
Yes?
Jagiello,
Yes.
Commissioner Corbin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Quillisi,
No.
Chair Merck,
No.
Commissioner Zabilla,
No.
Commissioner Powers.
No.
Motion fails.
Okay. I'm not sure where that leaves you guys.
It means that the project has not been recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, thus it will not move forward to the City Council.
Okay. Can they come back with a new thing, or is that a whole separate?
The commission could recommend it. For example, a motion could be made along the lines of the commission directs the applicant to return with a revised design that is consistent with, insert what you would like it to be consistent with, for further consideration. The project doesn't need to die now. The applicant could, based on the comments I've heard tonight, there's a possibility of a redesign that could satisfy the commission. The applicant may wish to have that opportunity.
So they could bring that back to us. Is that correct?
Along those lines, the commissioners might consider a motion to that effect.
I'd like to make a motion then.
All right.
I move that the commission requests the applicant to return with a modified design which more closely follows the Arcade Plaza design guidelines, and further that, excuse me, further that the applicant be subject to no more design review fees of any kind in this process.
The fee point is solely within the council's power and has already been done.
Oh, okay,
They've
so
already said
that's already,
The
It
council
said
has
no more
already
fees.
directed that this applicant shall not be subject to further design review permit fees, although they will be subject to building permits, et cetera. And that is a choice solely within the council's power. So
Okay.
it's both superfluous and not within your power.
now, the council's motion further provides that the project return to the city council no later than the council's meeting on November 14th, which is 3 meetings from now, I think.
Correct. There's time for the applicant to
So,
return to this commission before that deadline.
so we have 2 meetings between now and November 14th.
Bear in mind
The
that,
the second one may be too close to November 14th.
right, the planning commission's first meeting in November would be too close to the council meeting on November 14th to enable noticing of the item for the November 14th council meeting. Recall that the public hearing notices for the council's consideration of the matter must state the direction or the action of the planning commission under the Rialto Citizens case. So that means at least 10 days have to exist between the PC meeting and the
Okay, so
council meeting.
we have 1 meeting
Yeah,
where we could
Putting it in
reconsider
English, you
this
have 1 meeting.
project. Okay.
correct.
All right. So is that a motion?
That was, I would amend the motion to recommend that the applicant return with this modified design that more closely follows the Arcade Plaza design guidelines at our, what is today, October 4th, at our October 18th meeting.
All right.
If they so choose.
You want to second that?
Sure. I mean, if that's something the applicant wants to do,
I don't know.
I don't know either.
We're moving it.
That's why I said recommend.
I see.
Yeah.
We understand the motion to include a continuation of the public hearing that was closed, so that the project wouldn't need to be
That would be
renoticed.
part of my
Yeah,
intent,
thank
yes,
you.
sir.
Yes, we'd like to continue it that way, so.
Exactly. Therefore, we wouldn't need to renotice anything to spare time and fees.
I'll
So we're
second that
continuing
motion.
it to a date certain is what we're saying.
Right.
Right.
Thank you. And we have a second.
We have.
Could we have a roll call, please?
What's the date certain?
It's the
October
October
18th.
18th.
Thank you. Nolan?
Yes?
Jagiello?
Sure.
Corbin? Corbin?
No.
Quillisi?
Yes.
Merck?
Yes.
Isabella?
Yes.
Powers?
All right, so we get to look at this again. Thank you. Appreciate your patience with this process because it's a complicated one for us. All right, we're going to move on to discussion items, which there are none. Director decisions. Mr. Winiger, you want to lead us through the next few items there?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in your agenda packet a list of the recent director decisions. On your future agenda items, there are no current ones. We obviously will have this item that you just considered for the 18th, and we may have another item as well, I think. Yeah, so I don't know why there are a couple there should be on the 18th that are not indicated here. I have no other comments at this time.
Thank you. Planning Commission reports. Commissioner Nolan, looks like most of these are yours.
Actually, I'm going to request, if it's okay for the, that I do the report next month. I had the meeting today, but I had just a few minutes between that meeting and this meeting, so I didn't have a time to put the notes together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there a Sustainability Committee report? No?
No report.
Commissioner Corbin, you went to the Building Appeals Board?
Yes, Building Appeals Board. There were basically 3 issues discussed at the Building Appeals Board. And 2 of them had to do with the issues that the Building Appeals Board had with some of the 2016 State Building Code. The first one was the requirement for 27-inch deep foundations for every structure. And the issue that they had was that they thought that was somewhat inappropriate for like a shed.
Or a single-story building, for that matter.
And the option is that you get a $2,300 soils test, and then somebody comes out and inspect as you build your foundation for your shed at $225 a pop. So that was one thing that they decided needed some consideration. Second issue was about permit extensions. And the Building Appeals Board, Bob Daddy, wanted to put a limit on the length of time that you could have for a permit extension. He wanted to limit it to 1 year. I spoke as a private citizen opposing that because, you know, in many parts of the country, when you get a building permit or a variance or whatever, you have 3 years just to begin it. And there are extenuating circumstances, and because maybe one person doesn't complete a project and leaves a big mess doesn't mean that you should then impose a stringent restriction like that on the building extension, on the permit extension. So they're thinking about that. And the last issue they talked about was permitting fees. And there is a pretty general consensus that our permitting fees are high. And one of the issues that was discussed relates specifically to design review permits. And the way these are done is you apply for a design review permit, and the permit itself is $90, and then you have to put $1,800 into an escrow account. And that money is spent, you have no say over how that's spent. So if that continues over a long period of time, every time something gets sent back, and all of this has to be prepared, and somebody has to go through it, and staff has to look at, the dollar signs just keep adding up. Now, I just want to say that I did an addition on my house that required a design review permit. It was fairly straightforward. It went through, there were one round of corrections. Most of those were notes on the drawings that they wanted, and an index on the front page. And so I did that and sent it in. It was then given to the Planning Commission, who approved it in about 10 minutes. And when I went to get my building permit several months later, I was informed that in addition to the $1,800 I had given them, I owed them another $1,600, and I forget how much it was. The bottom line is that this simple permit that didn't have any complaints against it cost over $3,600. And I don't think that when we sit here and we have these meetings that we're aware of that, and I think we need to be. I think that the problem is that some of the work is not done here, maybe it's commissioned out, and there's no oversight. And when I ask for a listing of what those fees were for that I was charged, it took about a month, and I got a very kind of innocuous list with a name and an hour, and some of them were repeated, and I have no idea what anybody did, and I don't think anybody else did either. And I think that there's a lot of problems with that, and one of the problems is that it makes building in this town unaffordable for a normal person. I am a normal person, and I'm suffering under this project. And I think it really changes the nature of your town. You know, we always talk about how we want to have this small town feel. Well, you're going to have a small town full of very rich people. And that's a reality. And it's an issue that has to be considered. And I think that having and then a year later, I got another $100 bill, and I don't have any idea what that was for. And I'm wondering if the whole time I live in Ojai, every year I'm going to get a bill for something that I have no idea what it's for. So I think that if, in fact, there was a fee, and it was a set fee, people would be more conscious of the amount of time they spend on something, and things might get done in a more expedient fashion. So that was the Building Appeals Board.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sitting through that meeting, too. Councilmember Blatz, we've come to the end of our meeting, and we look forward to hearing from you.
I have something else.
You have something else to add? What?
Sorry, Paul. I'd like to, I've been talking with a few council members regarding the tiny home issue. There was a misunderstanding that it was agendized for the city council, but it really was supposed to be agendized for the planning commission. So I would like to suggest that you meet with city staff and agendize that item that we put on the shelf once we discussed the ADUs, and came up with that ordinance. We were going to revisit the tiny homes as a second dwelling subject, per the request of the city council.
Mr. Summers has a comment.
Thank you. One clarification. At the city council meeting last night, the city manager announced that there's some muddiness in the record on exactly where the tiny homes matter was to be put and where it was. So the matter will be coming to the council to provide explicit direction as to exactly who they want to have a look at it next, the council or the commission. Whether the commission develop a term sheet or the council to review a term sheet. So unless you talk to someone today, it will go to.
Yeah, there's been emails going back and forth with Sousa and Randy Haney. And there's real clear just people are forgetting the time sequence here. It was really clear. It's really not that muddied. everyone here remembers that we decided to, well, the people that were here, and you guys were not here at the time, but Rosalie, John, and Kathy were here, that we were going to take up that issue once the ADU agreement was done. We did that at a joint meeting with the council.
Right,
That's
and
on
it
record.
will come back to this commission. The council will evaluate exactly when to bring it to this commission.
Okay, oh, that's what you're saying. Okay,
The
got it.
council is going to
Okay.
make that choice, not staff.
Okay.
That's my
got it,
point.
Got it, okay.
Ask us for a term sheet rather than recommendation on a text.
The matter will be considered by this commission, but the timing will be determined by the city council. That's what the city manager
Got it.
will be
Okay,
bringing,
got
is to
it.
just
Okay, I didn't-
evaluate
I
the
didn't
council's
understand that.
timing.
Okay, got it, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm clear.
Councilmember Blatz, I appreciate your patience with our whole process here.
Thank you. I'm here for Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick, who's out of town. So he asked me to attend, which I was very happy to because I really enjoyed the deliberations tonight. It's a tough decision, and I hand it to you. Having been on that side of the Planning Commission dais for 10 years, I know there were lots of projects that came before us that were difficult ones to deal with. And the one before you tonight was a difficult one. We had a really good meeting with the school board last night. It was a joint meeting. It's the first real dialogue we've had with them, but it was very good. One of our concerns is that the Historic Preservation Commission has in front of it right now the landmarking of the Chaparral, part of the Chaparral building. And we were afraid that meeting with the school board, because if after the HPC decides on what's going to happen or what their recommendation is, it's going to come back to the city council. And we were afraid that if any discussions were had about it, that would cause some difficulties when it came back to us. So one of the kind of ground rules was that we weren't going to talk about the Chaparral building itself, and believe it or not, we didn't. But it was a very informative meeting in that they went through in detail the process that they have to go through in order to determine what they're going to do with that property in terms of, they explained the difference between putting it out to bid and doing it as an RFP. And I felt at the end of that meeting that we had really done a great deal to bring the two bodies together in terms of what is thought of and what's wanted for that particular property. So I was very pleased at the end of the meeting, and I thought the other participants were as well. I don't have any other comments tonight. Does anybody have any questions of anything going on at the council level? Or?
Well, in hearing this report from the Building Appeals Board and so on, I just wonder if we need to have a meeting with our state representative at some point. We seem to be getting all this pressure from the state saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to provide affordable housing, and now you have to change the size of all your footings. When do we ever get to go back to them and say, no, we don't want to do that? You know,
Well, when
is
it
there
comes
any-
down after it's any of these new ordinances or laws that are signed by the governor come down to us and they're interpreted. I suppose there's ways of interpreting them differently, but they have to be clarified at some point. I'll suggest it to the mayor that maybe we should have a meeting with one or both of our state representatives
Yeah.
and see whether or not they can shed any light on some of these things that you talked about as far as the BAB was concerned.
Yeah.
But it's other things too. I mean, tonight there was a perfect example of the new law for the accessory dwelling units, where if you already have let's say a pool house, as it was described, which in and of itself cannot have a kitchen, but it can have a full bathroom. But they're saying if you have that type of a structure, even though there's no kitchen in it, but maybe it has a toilet, a wash basin, and a shower, then you can't have an accessory dwelling unit. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The fact you have a shower, you don't have a shower, it's really the kitchen that matters. But I think if you have a kitchen, can you then have an ADR or ADU?
You can have two kitchens, the
Right.
main and then the one more.
Right.
But then if you have an existing If you have an existing single-family house and an existing pool house with a shower, and then you want to add an ADU that's fully within the existing structure, then you can do that.
Right, but a separate structure.
But a new separate structure, you wouldn't be able to do that
Yeah.
under the current structure.
Yeah.
And there's certainly room for the council to adjust that as
Right, and that,
desired.
for instance, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, that you have a shower in a pool house, which makes sense, and that would preclude you from having an ADU. But if that comes back before us, then we'll talk about it, I guess.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Following,
you.
following the joint meeting with the school board was a subsequent meeting just of the city council to consider reacting to pending legislation. And there was a 2 or 3 page list of bills that at the time the list was created were all pending. The meeting got very short because all of the housing-related bills, which was more than 1 page worth, have already been signed by the governor. So no letter for or against seemed appropriate at that point. I did wonder, though, if the city attorney could inform us. You have mentioned that with the ADUs, for example, there is wiggle room for localities like our city council to modify the requirements that are in the SB 1069 from last session. Is that same flexibility present in all of these housing bills that have been signed recently? And you may not know yet.
Most of
but-
the housing bills that have been signed, of which the most important is SB 35,
Right?
does not have a lot of flexibility for the city, or any city, this or any other one. SB 1069 from last year that amended the state ADU law created the option for the council to go beyond, but not less, to be more enabling of ADUs, but not less enabling. The council made some choices with the commission's input on being more enabling on that. But some of the housing bills that were signed by the governor on Friday, several of those did not have any room for being less restrictive than the state's forcing. In particular, if you haven't been aware of it yet, SB 35, in a nutshell, provides that if a city hasn't met its RENA numbered, not zoning, but RENA building level, in other words, if there's been less units built at any given income level and a project has at least 10% affordable units, then it must be approved notwithstanding anything else. No CEQA, no zoning, no nothing. There's a couple of exceptions, very high fire hazard severity zones, coastal zones, et cetera. We're currently reading the bill in full, and we'll have a memo prepared soon. But that particular bill doesn't have a whole lot of exceptions for the city. It was worded to take away most of the previous exceptions. But there's still about a half page of exceptions. So, there's some room there. Last point on the bills is that SB 229 has not yet been signed, though I haven't checked my phone in a couple hours. That was the one that further amends last year's 1069 to provide that a second or accessory dwelling unit cannot be charged a capacity or connection fee by any utility, notwithstanding the utility's governance structure. That was not signed with the package of affordable housing bills that was signed by the governor on Friday. For some reason, it was separate.
So the sewer district is still running loose.
It is expected that the bill will be signed. But until Brown acts, we don't know. Thank you.
Matt, but they felt that even before that, it was not a legal fee, that it was a burdensome fee.
Agreed. OVSDs and other agencies like it, existing interpretation of SB 1069 is false and inconsistent with that law itself, but the new law removes any ambiguity.
I will mention, I'm on the board of directors of Gold Coast Transit. As part of my assignment on the city council, we had our board meeting this morning, and we had a relatively lengthy discussion on SB 1, which is the new excise tax on gasoline. And it adds an additional 12 cents to what is already a fairly high tax lien and gas tax. And it makes California the highest gasoline tax in the nation by not that much, really. I think a couple of cents over Pennsylvania. But it does put us in #1 position.
All right.
It's going to be 52 cents now of taxes. That's just state taxes. There may be federal taxes on top of that, too. But 52 cents is to the state.
That's state excise and sales tax,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still local sales tax.
That's correct. Yeah.
We're number
Thank you
one.
again for all your hard work. It's not
Well,
easy.
Thank you. Appreciate all your work on the council. This meeting is adjourned.